Hey guys, Tom here again from synthhacker.com. Welcome back to another tutorial for Serum. In this tutorial we're going to be looking at a bass sound from a Gorgon City track called Saving My Life. You'll have probably all heard it, it's in like the charts and stuff at the time of making this video. And yeah, I'll just quickly show you the sound and then we'll get into making it from scratch. Really cool sound. It's this really kind of nice, deep, punchy bass. I think that's the main characteristic that kind of stood out to me, was like how punchy it is at the start. And there's not too much kind of high frequencies in the sound as well. It's quite nice and deep and yeah, it's just a really nice sound. It's actually quite simple. And the funny thing is, it's actually quite similar to a bass sound that I already made for Massive, that I did a Massive tutorial on a while ago for a Shiba San bass. I forgot what the track's called. I think it's called OK. And yeah, it's kind of similar to that. There's a kind of few similarities, and actually a few people asked me to make that bass sound in Serum, so hopefully this kind of does the job as well. But there are some slight differences, but yeah, I'll go ahead and initialize the patch. As always guys, these videos are supported by my website over at synthhacker.com. If you haven't done so already, definitely go ahead and check that out to check out my presets for Serum and other synths as well. There's kind of a variety of genres on there at the minute. I'm constantly adding like new sounds to it as well. And yeah, I think you'll get a lot of use out of them, and thanks in advance if you do decide to purchase those. It really does help support me and the channel. But without further ado, let's begin making this Gorgon City bass sound completely from scratch. So the first thing that we're going to do is just start off in oscillator A. You'll have seen at the beginning that it's just a really kind of simple square wave. Where are we? Basic shapes. We just go to square wave. The funny thing is that all these like deep house, I guess it can kind of be referred to as deep house because it's kind of evolved a little bit now, that genre, and become a little bit more commercial. You know, it's not like the stereotypical old like proper like techno inspired like deep house. It's kind of become this more kind of commercial thing. But yeah, because it's kind of like a resurgence of like old music from like the 80s and 90s. You'll tend to find that the sounds used in them are just using like really basic waveforms like square and saw, and even just like sine waves as well. And this is because like back in the day, you know, digital synths weren't as popular. Many people just used like analog synths, which only were kind of limited to the like really basic waveforms. So that's kind of a little bit of a history lesson for you there. But typically, you know, these types of sounds just use really simple wavetables and or waveforms, I should say. So we're going to go ahead and pitch this down -1 octave. This will depend on the kind of octave of the MIDI notes that you're inputting, but I just pitched this down -1 octave. And then just to kind of reinforce the low end a little bit, I also added a sub-oscillator an octave below oscillator A and set this to go directly out. Now, just on its own, just having this one oscillator, there is a lot of low end, but what I found was because the melody I was using from the track kind of went from a higher octave to a lower octave, when those first initial notes were playing, the low end was lacking a little bit. So I just added this little sub oscillator just to kind of reinforce the low end a little bit. But yeah, it will completely depend on the notes that you're kind of playing. The next thing I'm going to do, which is what I actually did for the Shiba San bass when using Massive, to kind of add that like punchiness, which is really characteristic in this bass, was actually use an envelope to modulate the pitch of oscillator A. So what I did was just take envelope 3, make a really kind of short decayed envelope, like really short. And then what I did was simply just drag and drop this onto the coarse pitch and then Alt-Shift-Click. So it's just going from high to low. And then I actually pitched this up 3 octaves, so 36 semitones. And yeah, this is like something that a lot of people do, or well, pretty much everyone does when synthesizing kick drums, to add that like nice punchiness to the start of the sound, by just kind of modulating the pitch with a really short envelope. And you know, a lot of bass sounds in deep house have been doing this, so that's just a really cool little tip there. So I'll just show you what we've got now. One second. So you can kind of hear that really kind of slight pitch modulation at the start. I mean, it's still a way off yet because we haven't added the filter, but you can kind of hear the effect that that's having. The next thing I'm going to do is set up envelope 1, which is of course the amplitude envelope for the sound as a whole, and we're also going to be using this as a modulation source for the filter cutoff as well. One thing that I kind of recognized when I was listening to the sound was that it's actually got like quite a long decay and quite a long release, which is pretty cool. And then I guess they've kind of compensated for how long the release is on the bass by heavily sidechaining it, which is what I did in the demonstration at the beginning. Otherwise, the learn would be kind of a little bit messy. But yeah, it's a really, really cool effect. If you've got a bass sound like this with kind of like a long decay and a long release, I like heavily advise you to kind of use a lot of sidechain to kind of compensate for that. So I actually added a lot of release. I think it was like nearly 700 milliseconds, something like that. The other thing that you're going to really want to make sure to do when you've got bass sounds with a long release time is make sure that the sound's set to mono. This just means that every time another note's pressed, the previous note is going to stop playing. So the previous sound triggered by the last note is going to stop playing, and that's just really, really important. Otherwise, you'll have loads of notes kind of blending in with each other and it'll sound really shit. So yeah, that pretty much covers that. Moving on to the filter. I just use a low pass 24 dB filter, which is the same as a 4-pole filter basically. And this is really important as well. For these kind of like really deep bass sounds, you're going to want to use as an extreme a filter as you can. If you only use like a 12 dB or a 6 dB filter, you're not going to get that really kind of like sharp, snappy movement when you modulate the cutoff, which is really important. So yeah, set it to 24 dB, set the cutoff to around here, and then use the envelope that we set up here to modulate the frequency of the sound, which I'll show you here. Now I have noticed that we have got the kind of thumpiness from the pitch modulation, but it's a little bit too extreme for now, so I'm just going to bring this envelope back just a little bit. You'll just want to kind of tune this to what you like. Some people, it's the same with kick drums. Some people really like kick drums with a really long pitch envelope, a long decaying pitch envelope. Me personally, I really like short, snappy, like pitch envelopes. I think it sounds a little bit more polished, but obviously it comes down to personal preference. So just kind of edit that to what you think sounds good, really. Next, let's move into the effects. There's just two effects that I use. I use the hyperdimension effect and also the distortion. For the hyperdimension effect, I didn't use the mix amount to kind of make it sound wider, because I find that a lot of times if you went with sounds like this, if you add like a the hyper effect, which essentially puts like adds voices of unison to the sound as a whole, it doesn't really sound, it's hard to explain, but it doesn't really sound as like coherent and solid as just having the one voice. So I just put the mix of this down to 0. But then I use the dimension expander effect, which is basically the same thing as the dimension expander effect in Massive. And what I like to do to kind of make the sound bigger a little bit is move the mix up quite a lot. I think I put it just over halfway, but then bring the size right down, because I find if you put the size like too high, you get this kind of like short delay, which kind of doesn't sound too good. Whereas if you move the size down to quite low, it kind of makes it sound as one, rather than kind of one sound and then a delayed version of it. And then I just basically just left the tube distortion as it was, just to kind of add some nice like tube saturation or distortion. Just makes it sound a little bit warmer and more interesting. And then this should be the finished sound. really cool stuff. Quite a simple sound, but you know, hopefully you can use a lot of the techniques that you learned from this, and kind of do your own thing with it as well. Especially the interesting stuff with like the pitch envelope and stuff like that. And yeah, it's just really cool sound. I really like Gorgon City and their style. I really love kind of like the kind of like commercial like deep house stuff. It's actually like really cool, a lot of it, with some like really nice bass sounds. So yeah, hopefully you got a lot out of this tutorial. If you did, please leave a like, and subscribe to stay up to date with future tutorials that I'm bringing out all the time. If you have any questions about this sound or any other sounds, let me know in the comments. I try to get back to as many people as I can. If you haven't done so already, again, go ahead and check out my website over at synthhacker.com to check out my presets for Serum and other synths as well. And that pretty much covers everything, guys. So thanks a lot for watching. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for all your support, and I'll see you in the next video.